name is John Zielinski. I'm an author and a publisher, and I have done programs for public television. On March 6th of this year, I was at a bank on Nifong, the Boone County National Bank, and in came Monta Welch. She began talking to me about global warming, invited me to one of her meetings. I went that night, and I have been with her ever since, because I think this is a major issue that should concern every American. Monta?
I'm Monta Welch, and I started the Columbia Climate Change Coalition here, I guess actually late last year, so we're not even a year old yet. But the coalition began with people interested in seeing the film An Inconvenient Truth. We showed that to a wide variety of people, students and civic individuals, just the regular general public, so as to help educate. And the city was just going into their visioning process, and we were hoping that citizens who were interested in the city's visioning process, the Columbia visioning, would also be able to see this film, because not that much had been coming out in the news about climate change until Al Gore's film came out. I myself had been hearing more about climate change prior to the release of his film, which came out in the summer of 2006. But in the fall of 2005, I was reading more about the scientists and the work that they were doing and had been doing actually for decades, and how the scientists were becoming alarmed with the speed up in the changes with the global climate change coming faster and faster. So I tried to get this information to the media and didn't have much luck. So I was really happy to hear that Al Gore's film was coming out, and later that fall, nothing much seemed to change even with his film. And later that fall, I tried to speak to the Columbia Public Schools about potentially getting information in the classrooms about climate change. And that was how the showing of An Inconvenient Truth evolved in a local setting, and it was publicized primarily to students at the high school and the 3 different colleges that we have, university and 2 colleges here in Columbia, as well as the citizens, to just help inform them about the science and what's coming in for all of us around the planet with the weather and our climate change and what that really means for all of us. And since the showing that we did here in November of 2006, after that, earlier in January, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released a report that it releases it releases every 5 years. And it began periodic releases. It addresses different topics throughout several different releases. And that came out in January. Then we also had a Supreme Court decision that came out shortly after that regarding the fact that pollution from tailpipe emissions could indeed be regulated by the EPA. And so starting in January, things began to loosen up a little bit.
But it was really, it seems to me, when Al Gore won the Academy Award, that it was boosted up. All of a sudden, when you're an Academy Award winner, it does generate considerably more attention. And I believe that that kicked it off. And of course, it doesn't hurt at all that he went on to win an Emmy and now later a part of a Nobel Prize. And I think that it is important for people to realize that it takes a lot of Monta Welches back on the small towns or medium towns across America, all raising their voices to say, hey, what's it going to do to our kids and our grandkids? Let's step it up right now and get something done.
Yeah, and that's where we When I met John, I was planning the Step It Up event that we put on here in Columbia as part of a national event. And as you say, people all across the nation were calling exactly for that, to have Congress pay more attention to this issue and to step it up. So we did have a program here.
At April 14th, and that April 14th was about the coldest, rainiest, wettest, snowiest April 14th that there could be. And people so often think that global warming means that it's always going to be warmer and warmer. In actuality, what it means is the weather roughens. And so you get what we got. March was the warmest March in nearly 100 years in this area, and April was the coldest month in nearly 100 years. And that's the kind of anomalies you get with global climate change.
So there were some reports about that time because of the unusual weather and the release of the IPCC report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report. So gradually things have started to become a little bit more on the front burner in terms of, if you look at the news and whether it's on television or media.
As you can see before us here, magazine after magazine, newspaper article after newspaper article, all saying, are we going to survive? Should we get rid of gasoline? And the one thing that has been coming up is the corn. And one review here says cornucopia. Well, cornucopia may not be the answer.
Well, there are very many different parts and pieces to this overall picture of global climate change. And definitely corn and how we travel, the transportation is an issue. In fact, let's see, on October 26th, a UN expert seeks to halt biofuel output has come out through the Associated Press. And basically, you know, he's just pointing to the fact that when we're using the food sources for fuel now, instead of to feed cars instead of people, then that's something that is really causing a hardship on a great number of the world's poorest populations.
And the poorest population does include us. You go to the grocery store now, milk is more. Any meat is more because corn is a basic foodstuff.
Sure.
And chickens and eggs and so on are more. So we're cutting off the blanket at the bottom and pasting it on at the top the same way we do with the, what do we call it, time change.
But so beyond, you know, the feeding of cars rather than people, when you're talking about the drought that you're starting to see, and here's another article entitled "The U.S. Battles Epic Drought," with 43% of the United States in a drought condition right now.
And Atlanta being in desperate condition. Now they're putting in all kinds of changes in Atlanta, including urinals that no longer flush because they can't afford to use up that water.
Well, definitely a lot of changes need to be considered. We used to be a conservation nation, but right now we definitely need to return to that. Even here in Missouri, we have had extended drought. So the drought that I was speaking of in 43% of the U.S. is either extended drought to very severe drought, just as you mentioned, John, in the South. So already we're hearing talk of what you might call water wars. And actually, when you really think about that particular component of it, a lot of struggle and a lot of even immigration. They've spoken of the fact that if indeed some of the predicted changes happen in terms of coastal, the sea level rising in coastal areas being flooded, but even the disaster with the drought, you know, some areas becoming a lot less habitable, so that people would become actually immigrants, or they will migrate
they
due
have
to
to
the
migrate
climate
to
change.
different areas. But in the case of the climate change, you're actually seeing 43% of America now experiencing drought, and in part the severity of the fires in California, which are on everybody's mind, were precipitated because they had such long drought conditions. On the other hand, Texas has had 6 times the normal rainfall that it has had in years past, and I believe that Oklahoma during the month of June had the most rain ever recorded. So what's happening is places that were wet are now dry, places that were dry are now getting awfully wet.
Well, it's just more, as much as anything, as you said, you know, the weather is more extreme, it's more erratic, so that when you have the drought and then you have a huge, you know, downpour, that water just can't go anywhere. It doesn't have time to soak in, and there's all the flooding. And
Texas had 6 times the normal rainfall, whereas other places like California weren't getting enough. And no place is free from flooding. London, or England, excuse me, not London itself, but England had one of the most severe floods, not of the century, but of the history of England. At the same time, France was burning up, and Europe has had more forest fires because of the dryness than ever in recorded history. And this is global climate change now, not tomorrow. We're not waiting 10 years for changes. The changes are taking place right now.
So to just kind of, you know, get our perspective, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change issued its report and stated 2 main things. And the 2 main things are that the globe is warming. It's unequivocal that the globe is warming. And the second thing is that humans are 90% likely to be the reason why, our human activity. And those 2 things have actually for decades had, you know, global warming is a hoax. You know, we have a different opinion by some folks, and at this point, even the people on the other side of the table on this issue are agreeing that yes, everyone now is in agreement that, again, the globe is warming. It's unequivocal, and and they're actually even agreeing that the humans are responsible. The argument comes with what percentage of responsibility. However, I know that, as I mentioned earlier in the year, you're starting to see more about it. You're starting to see governments doing and saying things because all these extreme events are happening. They're kind of being forced to face it by Mother Nature, if nothing else. But
well, go ahead.
Well, the human, the part that is in, you know, some kind of argument still is what amount do humans contribute.
Yes,
however, President Bush's science advisor, Professor John Marburger, gave a report to the BBC recently that, and you can see the Bush administration's position has changed on this issue over these last months to where, you know, he's calling for his own summit, and that at least is saying, yes, I guess humans are doing something that we can actually have an impact on. So you know, our administration, our government is actually finally admitting that yes, we do have human causes, and Professor Marburger says that it is 90%.
But the problem is that right now, the United States and Australia is doing more than we're doing, and we're doing less than almost any other country in the world with regard to that. And the reason I wanted to hold this up is because this is explaining that major corporations were paying scientists. Oh, you're going to write a nice article saying global climate change, it's just a normal cycle, it's not really happening, we're not causing it. Well, we'll give you an extra $10,000 stipend for that. And basically, they bribed the scientists who were saying, hey, this isn't happening, it's just a normal cycle. And now it's getting very worse, very fast. We had an anomaly like never before in the history, with 2 Category 5 hurricanes hitting Central America, one from the Gulf and one from the Pacific. Within a short time thereafter, there was a tropical storm supposed to hit Texas. 30 miles out, it turned into a hurricane. That's never happened before. And you just can click around the world. Cyprus is burning up. Greece has had major fires. And how long is it going to be before we take some drastic action? Now, you mentioned the BBC. There was a broadcast on the BBC in which they said, when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, the United States was woefully unable to cope. They didn't have planes, they didn't have ships, they didn't have tanks. He said 6 months later, everything was rolling off the assembly line. Now, Germany has already geared up to, I think they're the world's leading manufacturer of solar panels now. Why can't the United States do the same kind of gearing up? Get off our duffs and really get out there and start the manufacturing of all the things that'll get us off the oil and the other things and get us onto new technologies.
I think that there are movements definitely in the some industry sectors, because they realize the states are here and there patchwork putting together different kinds of rules and regulations, and there is some push for some federal regulations so that they can have some overall similar rules around the nation.
Yes, and you are also putting out a series of petitions and asking people to sign them on the local level, on the state level, and on the federal level. You want to tell viewers about that?
I do want to mention that we have petitions on our website. That's www.columbiaclimatechangecoalition.org, and you can read the petitions there. They were designed to be taken in a collective fashion to actually have a fairly big impact. And again, I'll mention that you said earlier grassroots is really important, and it is. Our city level petition deals with that, and it's in regards to our mayor's climate change agreement, which we are lucky that we actually have. And so many of the mayors, just like the states, are taking steps and measures to try to address this. So again, you know, the grassroots is very important, but also the regulation and the help from both ends, the bottom and the top, is needed to address the kind of direction that would actually really be called for in the situation. I know that there was a city, it was called a town hall meeting here in our city last week, and it was put on by the Chamber of Commerce, and there was a panel from the energy giant ConocoPhillips, and with panelists additionally from the university as well as our state government. And it was a very good meeting. The ConocoPhillips representative pointed out that they're having these all around the country. In fact, ConocoPhillips is sort of, you know, having this town hall meeting and working with the different chambers of commerce wherever it's decided to go. But they did say that in the statistics, there's really only about 100 years left of fossil fuel. I hear different figures sometimes, but I'm suspecting that probably someone in the energy business would be able to know what the more accurate amount is, so I'll go with his figure of supposedly we have about 100 years left of fossil fuel, and actually we have only about 75 years left of what it would take for the nuclear industry to provide our energy, so that would be more like uranium. And so the truth is that seeing as how we can see the end on the horizon, it makes very good sense to move into some new types of industry, certainly the renewables, the solar and the wind. And as you were mentioning, you know, Germany does have subsidies for these kinds of different alternatives. And so the truth is that seeing as how we can see the end on the horizon, it makes very good sense to move into some new types of industry. Certainly the renewables, the solar and the wind, and as you were mentioning, you know, Germany does have subsidies for these kinds of different alternative energy forms, particularly solar right now. And they're doing very well with turning their country around in terms of their needs. They're making a very good beginning effort with that, primarily because the government is behind it and the subsidies are there for the people.
And of course, that's exactly what we need here. As that BBC man said, if this were another world war, and if we treated it like a world war, and we all got rolled up our sleeves and got to doing it. Now, during the 1940s, there was gas rationing. If you wanted to go to the grocery store, you teamed up with your neighbors and you all went at once, and you went once a week. And if we were to start some of those conservation measures in this country, we could begin to save a lot of fuel, and we're only fueling the Arab nations now because the price of oil is up approaching $100 a barrel. And all it's doing is feeding their economy and feeding all the things they're doing, and it's sapping our economy because more and more people cannot afford the price of gas to go anywhere. They have to put a few dollars in at a time and drive around town and hope the heck they don't run out of fuel.
So it is true, we need to kind of rethink different elements and aspects of our society. How we travel is one, how we build our buildings, whether it's our individual homes or whether it's our civic buildings or whether it's our industrial buildings. All of these things have to be rethought, and there are good solutions in place even already. We do have the U.S. Green Building Council, and there are actual zero-emission homes that can be built utilizing solar panels. And you know, if every American home had solar panels, and like we used to have in the old days, we used to all of us have TV antennas and that sort of thing on our roof, until, you know, now we don't have that. But some of us used to have large television towers, even if you lived a little further in a certain area that didn't pick up the signal very well. And so, you know, we could even have, as long as we changed our city regulations, we could have smaller wind turbines even in every yard. So there really is a lot that could be done. It just depends on, do we want to do it? And it doesn't mean that we would have to have lifestyles that would, you know, have to be uncomfortable, just thoughtful and conservative and done differently.
The thing is that I think NPR has pointed out that the simple changing of an incandescent light bulb, one incandescent light bulb for one fluorescent light bulb in every home in America would make a $1,500,000 worth, the equivalent of taking that many cars off the road. It is pretty fantastic that minimal effort requires or will result in maximal gain. If we do that in our homes throughout this country, we can stop worrying about having to put in new gas-fired generating systems, which they're doing in this state. They're talking about putting it at New Madrid, and I hope everybody realizes that New Madrid is where the New Madrid fault is likely to happen. And that's all we need, is to put a new power station where we're likely to have an earthquake one of these days.
Well, I've seen, and that's one of the things that the Columbia Climate Change Coalition does, is that we offer educational programs. We have a very excellent film in 2 versions, a full-length version, and we have a 35-minute version, and it's called Kilowatt Hours. And it talks about how Americans currently, and you know, over the past numerous decades, have used energy and what it really is costing us, because the people in Appalachia are providing a lot of that energy through mountaintop removal, and it's a very environmentally destructive
energy, yes.
Form of mining. And these kinds of environmental degradation, it's very difficult for the people, the water, the air. It's all of it is very polluted. And in fact, you know, our entire country, you can't hardly go to any state where there hasn't been and or isn't still in the moment warnings about mercury for fishing and not to eat the
Yes.
fish. And the mercury, of course, comes, you know, from the coal, the pollution from using
Right.
so much coal.
And we also have the farm economy is not only based on oil for the actual driving of the tractors and other things like that, but all of the fertilizer and all of the pesticides that are applied to all the farm fields throughout this country are oil-based.
So again, you know, whether it's the water with the drought conditions, whether it's the pollutions with all the fertilizers and all the different other factors that go into, you know, our biofuels, the right kinds of things that we should be pursuing. I think that we have to take some serious looks before we go hugely into any of those other categories in terms of transportation. But definitely there are solutions that are shown in the film that I just mentioned, the kilowatt hours. It shows solutions of how much you actually can do with the solar panels and the wind energy, and with the conservation, changing your light bulbs, using more energy efficient appliances, doing all of the retrofitting and weatherizing for your homes, that at least the simple things.
Wow.
And all of the new buildings being built differently. With all of those kinds of components, we really do have, right now, we can easily not even have to build new coal or nuclear plants. We can actually take many of them offline. So we would love to share this information with anyone who might like to arrange an educational presentation.
Yes, and you're planning on doing that for schools and school children as well as women's clubs and other things like
Sure.
that. Any group that wants to listen, and hopefully we will make this program a part of that educational system. And we want them to understand that on a month-to-month basis there are meetings in which we discuss operations and hopefully point our way toward having a larger organization and be able to get out there and march, and get people involved, get local businesses to take part in this and make contributions to trying to keep this education up, showing them simple ways of doing things.
And when you said march, we recently did march in the MU Homecoming Parade. That was quite fun. We had an electric bicycle and regular muscle mass transported bicycles, and we had an electric scooter, and we, of course, you know, walked. But yes, we were in the MU Homecoming Parade and seemed to have a good reception.
And the kids took the little information sheets almost like they were getting candy. They stuck out their hands and one of the little information sheets, and we told them all, go talk to your teacher so that we can come and talk about what we can do.
Right.
And we have some new plans for some radically simple ideas that the school kids can do to change and to show how they can change their school and their home themselves.
Yeah, and I wouldn't really consider them even radical. They're just very simple, and they're back to our roots of being conservative, conserving things. Conservation is just a wise thing to do.
Well, if we simply install, this is the one factor, in our house, if we have electric hot water, if we had a simple switch installed or learned how to pull the fuse, and you're going away for the entire day, you pull the fuse on your electric hot water heater, that's the most energy consuming thing you have in your house. Your refrigerators, your freezers, and other things like that don't consume as much as that hot water heater.
Right, and right now the city has you know, an opportunity to help people get solar hot water heaters for they're assisting. They have a small rebate from the city for that. But sure, you could just unplug them and plug them back in when you come home, just like you turn off your lights when you leave and turn them on when you come home. And you can plug in a lot of your things to power strips and do the same kind of thing and set
And in many cases, the hot water heater will not go completely cold by the time you come back. It will stay warm. It's just you won't have scalding hot water, but it will
warms
heat
up
up
quickly.
within a half an hour after you plug it back in or
Sure.
turn the fuse back on.
Right, it's no major inconvenience, but
And it's little things that people have to learn to do. And we did have a solar tour recently, and the lady had a house in which she had shades for all of her windows, and as soon as the sun went down, those specially padded shades, she said, whenever I come home from work, I close all my window shades and hold all the heat in. And her bills for her entire heating and cooking and so on, which was an all-electric home, were like an average of $45 a month. And that's pretty fantastic. And when most of the people I talk to say 125 and more.
and her home is one of the ones that I was thinking of when I said, you know, right now we do have opportunities to have zero emission buildings, homes and other buildings too. And so hers is one of those. Yes, we do have you should check our website because we have different events. I'd like to mention something else that we haven't gotten to yet, but we did just have a solar tour and there are enough people interested. We definitely would like to have one next year in the kind of late summer, early fall, but we may have one even sooner than that because we have quite a few people that are interested in seeing these types of buildings. Also, when you were saying March, and I was trying to mention that we did the homecoming parade, we're getting ready to do the holiday parade. And so we would like to invite anyone who may be seeing this to visit our website and find out all the details of how you can join us and march with us in the holiday parade.
So are you going to wear a little red suit?
You can no, but we might have energy elves if we have young children.
Right, okay, energy elves, that's a good idea.
So if we have any students, you know, or scout groups, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, and schools, Sunday schools. Actually, this program, the educational program I was saying that we present, we certainly can do it to civic organizations, present it to the civic organizations, but we can also present it to, you know, Sunday classes, whether they're adult or we even have a small compilation for children that is a coloring activity handout, booklet kind of thing that we can tailor this conversation to any age, an age-appropriate educational program.
Yes, and you know, the kids really get into doing little drawings about saving things or planting trees or other things they can do to cut down carbon emissions.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to do. We want to involve the children because it is really the children's future. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily our future. It may not get so bad that we can't survive, but if it keeps on going downhill, it could be a little dicey for our children and our grandchildren.
It's definitely about the younger people's future, that is for sure. And as right now, we know, as you said, you started out the program saying global warming is here now, and I think a lot of us are beginning to just be able to look outside and see that it is, you know, the Mother Nature is definitely saying that it's here now. So yes, even for, you know, if you expect to live another 10, 20 years, then yes, it's probably your future too. But definitely it's about these children's future. And so we definitely think that, I've noticed that a lot of them really get into it. They seem to have a connection with the environment just at the ages that they are.
Children are much more likely to be involved in doing something and carrying it back to their parents, it does seem, than the adults and even the college students. You would think the college students would begin to realize that their future market for jobs are going to depend on whether or not we can get things rolling ahead. There's no reason why we shouldn't be creating all kinds of new solar panels and other technologies and reawaken our manufacturing in this country, but manufacturing green rather than the way we have been doing it.
Well, there's a lot of possibility right now. The U.S. has sort of given away some of its lead to, for instance, Toyota, you know, the Prius, and we aren't even making our own cars green enough to be able to sell them to the Chinese market because of their more stringent rules and regulations for their vehicles.
How
And
about
so,
that? The Chinese are more up to date than we are on.
So we do have some opportunities, though, in technology to develop this technology, and then, of course, transport that to the rest of the world. So there are a lot of, if we just decided to take a look at this in a different way and move on it in a different way, it could be very advantageous to us. There are new technologies even within the solar panel, the building of the solar panels, and so as these things get enough money, the research and development and the subsidizing of that particular industry would be very helpful, at least for a period of time. And since we have subsidized
Oil.
our coal and
Yes.
oil and natural gas, all of the fossil fuel industries for all these many years, I think that there, you know, we talk about a free market here. We don't really have a free market when some faction or another has a subsidy, unless the playing field is even or leveled and everyone either has a subsidy or everyone doesn't. Then you might have a free market. But regardless of, you know, whether we have a free market actually acting right now in that category or not, it would be wise to put some money into the research and development. And in fact, we do have individual entrepreneurs, again, taking the lead over our own government, in that Vino Kosla, he is a venture capitalist and has been, is well known in Silicon Valley in the whole industry with the computer and technology. In that industry, he's now looking very heavily towards lots of green investments, and began that after he saw Al Gore's slideshow the year before the film came out. And there are other companies finally. Now Walmart is trying to do a lot, not only for itself, but also asking its suppliers to do more, be more green. And
yes,
so there are
and in fact
things going on in the, you know, mainstream American, in our industry and corporations that are commendable, and we just need lots more of it.
Yeah. The Nifong store, we might mention this to the listeners out there, is actually one in which the lights automatically go off the minute the skylights have enough light coming in from outside. So you can be in there and you're assuming you're in a normal store with the fluorescent lights overhead, and you look up and find out they're all off because it's a sunny day and the entire store is being lit by Mother Nature.
And a lot of the reason, you know, that these stores are doing that is because they realize that it's actually improving their financial bottom line. They save money just like, you know, people,
Yes, of course.
just like homeowners and families save money.
In the minute that oil goes up, and oil is used in generating electricity, then the electricity price goes up. And the more we can offload the increasing demand on electricity, and we can do this, is a simple step beyond the fluorescent light. Now is the LED light, and the LED light is coming on everywhere, and it's just about like having a lightning bug in your house, because basically that LED light, which can provide brilliant light, will do so at 1/10 of the power of an incandescent bulb. Remember, Thomas Edison invented that like 125 or more years ago, and they haven't changed it months since he invented it.
The LED lights would be great to have people go ahead and invest in them and use them for their holiday trimmings, because I know that's going to be, with this upcoming holiday, something to think about. You know, what are we going to do? Feel celebratory or conserve? So that's a way to maybe do it without feeling like you're being so demanding of the environment, I guess.
Yes, and I'm experienced enough with LED lights that I bought some of them quite 7 or 8 years ago when I did write a book called Surviving Y2K the Amish Way. And I was buying them in 1999, and I spent nearly $100 for one of those flashlights that you didn't ever need a battery for, you just kept shaking it. And not too long back, I went into a dollar store in Macon and bought a little light that you just shake it, and I turned it on and I left it on for more than 10 minutes and it still hadn't run out of power, and I paid $1 for it. I also got some LED lights for flashlights that cost me $1, and those lights with 9 LED lights in them and so on will run on 3 AAA batteries for 100 and more hours. And we could equip our homes in some way with those push-on, push-off lights, which are available right now at the Dollar General stores again. And for $8 you can get 6 of those and equip your bathroom, your hallway, etc. with those lights. And all you do when you go into the hallway and need light is you push against it, boom, it's on. And when you finish whatever you're doing, you push again and it's off. And this requires no electricity, and the batteries are very, very minimal in price. And this is more ways that the simple homeowner can save, and that's part of what we're trying to do with the global climate change. Not only talk about the big things, not only talk about signing the petition to get the government to get busy and do something, but hey, what can we do if we look around here and figure out that we can buy this and it'll save us a lot of money. We have battery operated televisions that run on smaller power. And if we can just begin to conserve in our own homes and set an example for our children, what will happen is the manufacturers will say, whoopee, hey, there's a market for these things out there, and they will start manufacturing more. And that's what we need.
Well, it's about changing our habits based on what we know is coming. I mean, we can either stick our heads in the sand and act like, you know, we aren't going to be getting not only more of the same, but much worse, because we're ignoring the call of the scientists who we need to be listening to. And I know some of that is because we've, you know, been conditioned for all of the, you know, it's just like if you hear something enough times, you start to believe it. And so we've had
yes, that was Adolf Hitler's famous line, you know, tell a lie often enough and they'll believe it.
So we've had the denial machine in operation since the 1980s. And it's, as I said, you know, earlier in this, they're finally saying, yes, well, it is happening. And yes, well, we might argue what % of human contribution. But also, I've noted where their new line now is just trying to make people think, well, it's just not going to be that bad. But I think that when we see that these events continue to happen, we can see the possibility of how our social structure that we've created as a civilization, not only in our, you know, cities, in our states, nations, but around the globe, we can see that these social structures can and could be subject to unraveling.
Yeah.
You know, they could be unraveling. And if we, you know, continue to have all these, we've already seen how the insurance companies are, you know, starting to again be alarmed themselves, you know,
well,
about
Katrina and
all of these different things.
Half of the people who had insurance on their houses in New Orleans and along the coast there have not gotten the money that they should have received for the disaster. And now California is a monumental one again. Global warming factored into that, the dryness of the brush and other things like that, so that once somebody got a fire going, it went on and swept 500,000 acres and burnt over 2,000 homes, and we don't know how many businesses.
The thing is that, you know, we can see that this is something that if these events continue, the people from Katrina's devastation and now the Californians, you know, so
and
far the
who's
Katrina's.
Next?
Well,
what's next?
The people from Katrina, have they recovered? Probably not many of them, and not entirely. And I am sure that several years later we could say the same thing about what's gone on in California.
And right now we've got 90 days to Atlanta being dry if things keep going the way they're going.
So we do need to take it seriously, and we do need to realize that if we don't just accept some realities here that are clearly in our face.
Neighborhoods that really work together. World War II, as I said, was a great uniter of many people. When you had gas rationing, you had people going together to do things. I've said that the Amish are a wonderful example because when a disaster strikes, there's an Amish and Mennonite relief committee, and they'll all jump on a bus and go to an area where it's been devastated by a tornado, and they will work together. Habitat for Humanity is something along that line on a different scale, but Habitat for Humanity can also begin to do more solar positive houses. And I think Mont has been talking with members of the Habitat group to try to get them to see about making them more green in their building.
And we are trying to do a lot of work here in the community in all the ways that we can.
Yeah, mention some of the other groups that you've worked with or affiliated with.
Well, we have worked with the League of Women Voters. They helped us to formulate the petitions, and we've worked with the Sierra Club. They were instrumental in the very first, they tabled with information and helped in the very first event, which was the Inconvenient Truth showing that was sold out at the Missouri Theater. And the Missourians for Safe Energy have also been supporters of the work that we do. We overlap in our interests. But we have definitely tried to do a lot of outreach here in every kind of category. We've done some work with some of the different churches, and the Interfaith Peace Collaborative. We've tried to outreach with those individuals so that we can all begin to come more and more together and learn what we can do. We do have on our website a very good list of things that would be excellent, a very pretty comprehensive list. It doesn't have absolutely everything because there really are further and further ways you can take it, but it's got a very comprehensive list of things that you can do. Just pick a few and get started, and then when those seem easy, go back and pick a few more.
One of the easiest things was to change a light bulb. Who can't
Sure.
how many important people does it take to change one light bulb? This takes one smart individual, okay?
So,
Old joke.
So I was just wanting to just welcome everyone to get involved with us, and we do have some future programs planned. We're thinking of sharing how we can do the zero emission homes, the green building, in a future program here on the CAT TV, and we also would like to talk more in depth about transportation at some point. And I know that in November, early in November, we are expecting the final release this year of the IPCC's report. And I think that once people start hearing about that on the news, that they're going to be, when people start hearing about the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, their report, they will realize that what we're saying here is really, really important. And so you might be kind of keeping an eye out for information coming through the news on that. But we do plan to do an interview here with some of the university science people.
The important thing is that you got to keep stirring the pot, because people get complacent, and we don't want to have a national disaster in the Midwest that'll finally wake them up. Floods, tornadoes, and so on. We have had some severe tornadoes. We had that ice storm here that literally tore houses up so badly that a year later they were still working to change the siding and so on some of them. Mm-hmm. So it's time that we take action, start thinking about ways to protect our home. And I have said that Amanta and I will get together, and we're working on a book that'll make it nice and simple. It's an old advertising thing, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. We're going to try to lay out a book about 248 pages, an 8.5 by 11, with all kinds of, whoa, this is dangerous. And in between that, hey, here's what you can do to conserve. Here's how you can get your family ready. Surviving global warming, make your home an ark. It's the reference to the Bible, to Noah, to 40 days and 40 nights. I'm saying that any home should be capable of sustaining itself for at least weeks on end without having to run to the grocery store, because if disasters really happen, you're going to be up the creek and there's not going to be anything at the grocery store for you to get.
And I think we saw that on TV, all of us, very clearly with Katrina. So I think that, you know, these are things that shouldn't seem very radical to do, just to realize that, you know, if we want to take care of ourselves and our families and our neighbors properly, that it would be a wise move.
Well, the thing is that everything now that we do today, we could do better if we could recreate that kind of neighborliness that the Amish still hold on to, but the rest of us have kind of lost. I lived for a while in Madrid, Spain, and I said the city of Madrid was over 3 million people at the time I was there, but it was like a small town. I lived on a block. Everybody would stop me and say, "Hello, who are you? What are you doing here? Tell me about yourself." And I mean the maid that was scrubbing the steps and the other ones as well. And what I'm trying to do is say that we can join hands, and that's what the global climate change is about. We can, as neighbors, join hands again.
Yes, we all have to come to the table and help each other. And, you know, it'd be great if we did it, you know, from the goodness of our heart, but, you know, it would also be just good common sense.
It's smart, yes. It's smart to get involved now so that you can help us help you. And that's what the book will be about, and that's what the website will be about, and that's what our meetings are about, and so on.
Yeah, so we really appreciate that you're listening to the climate change information and thinking about the issue. And it would be great if we could have an interactive call-in show sometime, because I'm sure people would have specific questions or comments even to, you know, that we could clarify. But there is...
I think we need to probably do that at some place like KOPN, where
Sure.
they are set up to do phone-ins.
Sure.
And it's definitely something that we do need. People have to get involved and not just leave it for the politicians, because if we don't get involved, neither will the politicians. The more people that write, that phone, that sign, and so on, the better off we're going to be in the end.
Yeah, definitely do our own part and also encourage our government, because as we did mention earlier, the grassroots is very important, and that's what actually makes the government get involved. So yes, we need action at both ends of the spectrum.
And in one respect, the people that are involved in the peace movement are also beginning to be involved in the in this climate change coalition. I mentioned, is it Ted Flack? And they did lead
Ted Glick.
Ted Glick, okay. They did lead a protest in Washington, D.C. He did get arrested and so on. And what we're trying to do is say, hey, let's get together and think about that. The war is one thing. For the money we have spent on the war, for the billions and billions and billions we have spent on that war, we could have changed
so many things.
Our economy, and we could be making huge leaps forward in global climate change by solar paneling, by downsizing our need for electricity, and so on. Now, give them your website again.
Well, I want to make one more comment, though,
Go ahead.
about how, again, we did kind of touch on it earlier, but the war itself, you know, most every war, wars are fought for two reasons, essentially. And one is ideology and one is resources. And most wars have a combination of those things. And so you can look about, as we talked about earlier, the water wars, you can kind of look around and look about what's going on and realize that if we want to, you know, we would like to not have war, or we would want this particular war to end, or whatever we might, however we might feel about violence or any kind of conflict, it's not going to stop, it's not going to go away, especially as the resources get more and more challenged. So we need to realize that, and that the underlying cause of war is very related to how we use our resources.
To look at our Earth from the outside is to discover an entirely new planet. We can see familiar landforms, like Florida and the Bahamas. But what's most striking from space is that our world, unlike any other we know of, is a world